So, hello and welcome to our latest episode of the Kith Kin Podcast, Stories from the Hospitality Industry. And I'm really happy to welcome Bex here to tell us all about the ups and downs that have brought her to where she is and what makes the hospitality industry so special. So, hi, Bex. Thank you so much for coming and joining me with this conversation. So, can we just start with an introduction to who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Cassie, for having me on this sunny morning. So I'm Bex Wilkins, co-founder of Makers of Hospitality. We've launched our own pub company. Opened our first pub in May last year, 2024. Looking to open our second this July. Prior to what I'm doing now, I was marketing director at Peach Pubs, working for Peach for 10 years. And decided after a decade there that it was time to go and do it for myself. So it's myself and my wife's business. She too was actually at Peach Pub, so we both jumped ship to set up on our own. Hopefully tell you a little bit about that journey and some ups and downs during our chat today.
Amazing. So let's start from the beginning. Where did it all start? So what was your first introduction to hospitality? Where did you begin?
Kitchen porter. I think back in the day where you could work at 13, I think it was.
Wow. No, I mean, I was going to say you're not the first person to come on this and say that you're a kitchen porter, right? And I always say kitchen porter is like such an amazing place to start because that's the point that if you're the kitchen porter, you see everything. You're the heartbeat of the whole thing, and the whole thing collapses unless you're doing your job properly. But 13 perhaps is the youngest.
A local kind of pub needed a bit of pocket money, you could do a couple of hours at the weekend then and earn my keep. So that's where it all started. The gate hangs well in Bromsgrove. I went, ironically, gone completely full circle because now we are back in Bromsgrove and opened our first pub here, so that's quite funny. That was many years ago, and I think it's an industry that kind of gets in your blood, doesn't it? It's one that I've tried to leave numerous times.
We all do.
And you get pulled back in. Kind of moved from that, went and did various waitressing jobs, front of house. Worked my way through, ended up as deputy manager for M&B. So worked with them for quite some time and just never wanted to be a GM. Kind of loved the industry, loved the sector, but running a business, running a pub, again, how ironic, at that time was just not for me.
Wasn't for you. So, but I mean, what were those types? So, I mean, so actually, just going back to that first job, as a 13-year-old as a pot washer. I mean, I do have to ask, what sort of operation was it? Bearing in mind that they employed the 13-year-old to work the pots.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little country pub. I think it was, back then you were either, collecting glasses, you were, in the kitchen, or you were doing, the local newspaper. They were the only jobs that were available to you. It was a couple of hours on a weekend, couple of hours on a Friday or Saturday, and then a Sunday. I used to get dropped off, get picked up, and it was it was hard work.
Does that mean there were a few of you doing that then? So they had a few young people working.
In the week. I mean, still now, a lot of kitchen porters are, 17, 18, 19. So I would say the predominant, most of them were under 20. Yeah. And it was just, you went in, you got absolutely filthy, you smelt like food, but you had a couple of quid in the back pocket at the end of the day. So that was kind of my first introduction to hospitality and kitchen life.
Yeah, because it's interesting because my last pub was incidentally called the Gatehouse Well. It wasn't the same pub, but it was the Gatehouse Well, and there was a point, and it was post COVID, so it was that period just after COVID when actually there was, well, I mean, there's always a staffing crisis, but there was a particular staffing crisis in the industry. And we ended up with, I think, the average age of all of our staff was about 18, our average age, because we had exactly that situation. We were a country pub and there weren't that many people around, and there was a staff shortage nationally. And so actually we were filling all those positions with young people. But I think, I mean, I didn't go as young as 13, except for actually, yeah, I did have my children in there occasionally. But but they didn't count as staff. But we did have, 15, 16-year-olds working there, and it's a very interesting dynamic when you've got so many young people in those environments. But as you say, you know, historically, the industry is filled up with those, you know, those roles. That is the introduction for young people into the industry.
Yeah, and I think, you know, now with the pub we've got, you know, we've got, you know, 16, well, we've got a 16, we've got 17-year-olds working for us. And actually, you know, how you see some of these young people come into the sector, and then when they leave, the confidence, you know, their, you know, the way they can go over to a table of strangers and just talk to them, you know, when you see, you know, them grow and develop in themselves, it's so rewarding. And, you know, we've had a couple who have left us, and you're just like, wow, when you came in, you were quite a shy, timid young person.
Didn't know
And
how
now
to
you're
speak. Yeah, didn't know how to speak to people. And certainly didn't know how to speak to adults, and to be in that environment, that, I mean, it is very rewarding, because actually you see that change so quickly in young people, in that they come in and they've all of their interactions up until then has only been in the school environment, and then suddenly they're in these adult environments being expected to talk to people and deliver good customer service, and to be part of the team, and an essential part of the team immediately, you know. And so you see them grow so quickly, and that is very rewarding. You're right.
yeah, and I think it's that, you know, that the skills you learn in the workplace, to your point, is very different to how it is in school. You know, suddenly you've got to carry your own. Suddenly, you know, we've had some, you know, some teens who are, you know, too nervous or too anxious to come in for a trial. So when you see those, you know, that do actually think, no, I'm going to give this a go, and then they do really develop, it's really great to see. So I think, you know, starting at 13, I probably did, you know, I was always quite a confident teen anyway, but I think, definitely being in that environment early on and having my own money and, you know, being that, I mean, you know, I moved out at 16. I moved in with my boyfriend quite young, so I needed my own pocket money. Kind of that starting at a younger age, and having that, you know, worth of money, knowing, you know, knowing how, you know, how important it is to,
And
you know,
knowing
to
that you
look at.
worked for it. Yeah, so when you spend money, you know, oh, that was 2 hours worth of work. That was this whatever it is that you're buying. It does give that value, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny with all the national minimum wages going up. We actually started Googling what it was when we were at work, and I was saying, I was like, you guys now, £10 an hour, like, you know, and especially, well, when we actually Googled it, my wife, there was no minimum wage when she started working. So,
No, no.
yeah, it just goes to show, like, how things have changed.
But that's really important, actually, when we look back at how the industry's changed and changing still, and it's still got a long way to go. But part of that is you've got a generation of people in charge of, you know, and in the industry currently. So the Gen X's who were working below, you know, there was no minimum wage when I started, and so we were working when I wanted to move out of home with my boyfriend. I had to work 80, we both had to work 80-hour weeks in the industry, because otherwise there was no chance of being able to pay the bills, because we weren't being paid anything reasonable. And there was no, you know, and so, you had to work 80-hour weeks in order to move out. And so you've got this generation who are in charge now that are going, yeah, but we did it. So therefore, everyone, you know, but actually, I mean, we're all burnt out and unable to work now.
Right. Definitely to change.
Yeah, put the two things. Yeah. Anyway, back to your story. So you're now working for M&B. Yeah. So yeah, and you don't want to do management. Yes, I say you've ended up in that, but you don't want to be doing management. So where did you sort of find your path?
So I then became kind of I dabbled, social media was just coming out at that time. I was kind of building up. I was working in Stratford at the time, Stratford upon Avon. I didn't really have a great leader there, and I think that's another thing with hospitality and why we kind of decided to go and do something for ourselves was because when we looked back on our kind of career and life in hospitality, there wasn't many great fond memories of some of the people we worked with. To your
Yeah.
point there, it was long hours. There was no work life balance. That some of the people we worked for were not, great people, predominantly male. And I think that there was nothing really, there was no aspiration, there was no like, yeah, this is a great industry, and I could really make a career out of this. And I think there's still that issue a little bit now. Hospitality is still sometimes seen as oh, well, I'll just do this till I get a real job. And it's like, well, this can
Yeah.
be a real job. You can really make a career out of this, which is what both me and Sarah have done. So yeah, M&B was great. I kind of started looking after kind of the area and doing some training in the area. As I say, kind of really started to ramp up a bit on the marketing and talking about how you can get your pub out there with social media and Facebook. So yeah, it was great. I enjoyed my time there, but kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. Um, and then I eventually moved to Peach. That was kind of from M&B to open a new pub in Birmingham, which was the Highfield in Edgbaston. So that then was going from a kind of corporate environment where you were just a number, you were a kind of a cog in a big machine, to actually working for Peach, which was an independent founder-led business, running kind of premium gastropubs,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
the whole ethos and way the business was run was just very different. It was.
Just for anyone who doesn't know Peach, I mean, how many pubs were in that group?
God, when I joined 10 years ago, there must have been, I think we probably did 9 or so openings in the time there. So yeah, we were doing one a year. So it was probably 13, something like that when I
Yeah.
joined.
Yeah.
Started, had their first pub, the Rose and Crown in Warwick. And yeah, Lee Cash and Hamish, two very different founders. Lee, very much an operator, very old school in
Yeah.
his way at that time. And then Hamish, who was more of the business acumen, definitely more behind the scenes, whereas Lee was very front facing. So just a very different business where you were known, you were a person, as opposed
Yeah.
to in
Yeah.
a big corporate M&B environment.
Because I think that's really, really important. And I think it's something that I bang on a lot about with Kith and Kin is that the world, the court, there's, hospitality from a customer's point of view, they might not know the difference, but from, when you're in it, that corporate world of hospitality is extremely different to that independent world. And just, and sort of demonstrated it in what you're saying, the independent world, even when you've got, what I mean, what Peach have got now that that I had that it's quite, yeah, but it's still independent, and it's still independent at its heart of you know of how it operates. And also when you're working in that environment, even though there's hundreds of people across the whole, across even 22 businesses, there'll still be hundreds of people, but still everyone's still very individual, rather than in that corporate thing of being a cog. And actually, I mean, I did go on a rant about this recently about um going to hospitality industry events and having CEOs of the corporate world tell us how we should be running our businesses, and you're like, you don't know. It's not this. It's not the same. It's almost not the same industry. We look the same, but it's not the same. It's a very different environment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was, I learned a lot in my time with Peach, and back to, the original point of never wanting to be a GM. I actually then carved my pathway of moving out of operations as a deputy manager into a central support, the marketing team, which is where, I never went to uni. I never really knew what I wanted to do. And, it was only when we opened the Highfield in Edgbaston where I, really kind of found a love for marketing and saw how powerful that could be, and decided ultimately to go off and do my marketing qualifications and leave that business as marketing director, running alongside the ops director. Obviously, Peach eventually did get sold, and got part of a larger PLC, which ultimately is one of the reasons why we left. But
Yeah,
it was a great career path for me to then move from ops into marketing, and develop and learn everything from not just marketing, but we were also doing commercial. I ended up doing purchasing, so a lot of the skills then I learned from being in an independent, where you are able to touch a
yeah,
lot of areas of the business, is ultimately what gave me the skills to know I could do it and set up on our own.
yeah. Brilliant. So what happened? What happened next? So yeah, where did you go?
Yeah, so we Hope in the Highfield, that was a great success. It was super busy. We were kicking out, some real high volume. That's where me and Sarah met. She was the GM there. And yeah, as I say, kind of found a love for marketing, kept my fingers in the pie, so to speak, and kept working there part-time while I went and did a bit of agency. But ultimately then came back to Peach and kind of said to Hamish, look, I really want to do marketing. Is there a gap in the centre team for a marketeer? And he said, yes, it'll be looking after our southern pubs. At the time, the way the marketing team worked is we all had a pod. So I was then looking after the furthest. I mean, I lived the most northern. It is only it was north of all the pubs, and I was looking after the south region, so that was a lot of travel. But that's what I had to do to kind of get that job in the marketing team. Ultimately progressed through to marketing manager. And as I touched upon, started. Yeah, Hamish was, absolute great leader. He's definitely one of the best I've worked with and for. Just got you involved, really pushed me. And there wasn't ever a no. There was like, why don't you look into this? Why don't you learn about this? All those things. So ended up heading up the food and drink team, looking after product for the business. And ultimately, when the business got sold, sitting on the exec team of the wider business, which was, great. And I did that for 12 months. But again, back to the original point of being a cog in a big business, it was then
Yeah,
very different for me. My role was very different. And it was that I then thought, actually, I like independent. I like,
yeah,
working with small businesses. And actually, I think it's time to go and do this for myself. So we started Makers of Hospitality originally as, I thought, well, I'm going to, go and do freelance. I'm going to go and offer, set up a consultancy and support other independent businesses from everything from, is your GP working? Is your product right? Do you need some
yeah,
marketing
yeah,
support? So we set up the business. That was like in the July. I then decided, right, actually, I've got a 6 month notice period. If I'm going to go and do something, I need to hand my notice in. So that was in the October. And we kind of didn't really know what I was going to do next. I kind of said, look, this isn't for me. I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying it anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's not this. That was in the October.
But that not enjoying it anymore, that was because you felt that you'd sort of moved too far away from the bits that you did love.
Yeah, and I think again, back being in a corporate environment,
Yeah,
I enjoyed being at home, and when you're suddenly on an exec team and you're having to go away for 3 nights, every month and talk about things that's is just not get it, or not, it feel like we're having the same conversation 6 months down the line and nothing's
yeah,
changing because again, we're
yeah,
a big car.
yeah,
It's a business as opposed to small dynamic businesses. You say one thing today, we do it next week and it changes because it's small and it's fast, and it's dynamic, and suddenly we weren't doing that. We were having conversations, stuff wasn't changing, and it was just, I was like, this is just, we're saying the same stuff 6 months down the line,
yeah.
nothing's happening.
So you feel like your time has been wasted in that you've come up with you've sort of identified the problem, come up with a solution. There you go, and nothing. And so yeah, it's not you're not making a difference, I guess, anymore.
Yeah, and that's the buzz, I think, of hospitality.
Yeah,
It's so quick. It can be, we can change things really quickly. And when I'm a fast-paced person. I'm always, on the go.
yeah,
I'm not I can't sit back and just be relaxed and chill. That isn't me. And I think when you're suddenly in an environment where you can't, yeah, it's frustrating. It is really frustrating. Um, and so I then decided, it was time to do something else where I could make a change, where I could make a difference. And again, I was at a point in my career where I couldn't see what was next in that business.
yeah,
Ultimately, I remember saying to Hamish many years ago, I wanted his job, I wanted to run Peach as an MD. And I just thought, I don't want to do that as part of a PLC. That isn't what I want to do. I don't want to be marketing director of the bigger business because again, it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I was kind of, at a bit of a crossroads, and the only way I could get out of it was to leave and give myself some time to think, what am I
yeah.
going to do next? And we'd set up the business, so I knew if I wanted to go and do some freelance, we could do that as well. And then it was only when Sarah had a bit of a shit day at work, came home and said, right, I found a pub, I've applied. And I was like, oh,
Easy,
yeah.
as you
We'd
do,
al-
as you do.
yeah, I mean, I'd always had this burning desire of running my own pub. Like, it was just there, and I just, never thought we'd get there. Sarah had previously had her own couple of pubs down south when she lived down there. She's like, always said, no, I'm not doing it again. But obviously I managed to convince her to, and I said, it'll be different this time. Like, we'll really, you know, be good at it. Like, we're both great operators. We know.
Yeah, and I guess it is different if you've got the right people around you. That is key. That is quite a big important factor. If you're trying to do it on your own, or you've got people who are fighting against you, then it is really this is a tough industry and it's a really tough job. But if you've got other people with you and you've got people that everyone's aligned and you know what it is you're trying to achieve, then actually it can be reasonably simple. I say
Yeah.
reasonably because to pretend that it's ever simple. Well, and to be honest, I mean, like you say, you wouldn't want it to be anyway.
Yeah, and we always say, oh my God, we've got two brains on this. If there is two of us, a lot of people go at it alone, and we only knew it was possible if we had a great chef with us as well. We knew we couldn't do it and food we wanted to do without, without an amazing kitchen team. And when we knew we spoke to Pete and got him on board, and he was like, yeah, I'm definitely want to do this with you both. We knew it was right. We knew we had both the skills to run a business, and got the operator front of house side. And we knew Pete was an excellent chef, and could kick out some amazing food. So it was, and we found the pub. The landlord was investing 500,000. It had been shut for 2 years, so it was quite a straightforward kind of marketing plan and strategy to kind of introduce the pub back into the community because it had been
Yeah,
empty and unloved for
yeah.
so long, as
I was
opposed to
going to
take.
say,
business that was already doing well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I've seen pictures of the pub, and been shut for 2 years. It's basically the sort of pub you'd walk past, go, oh, that's a shame. It was pretty much derelict, wasn't it? And although that is obviously a huge amount of work, you're right. It also is an opportunity for a great story to be told when you bring it back to life.
And I mean, it was blue. It was bright blue from the outside. I mean, it was unloved inside. It's ironic because Sarah went and had a look at it and she said, right, we're doing it. And I said, okay. And I never actually went and looked at it. And then when we went back for our first meeting, I was like, oh my God, like this needs a lot of work. And it was a massive refurb project. But oh my God, just we're in a tiny little I guess hamlet. There's a population of 400, and the people in the village absolutely just like love that they've got a local village back. They
Wow.
love down, and just that bringing life back into the pub, and bringing, like you say, there's some gorgeous pubs out there, and if it's the right pub in the right area with the right operator, it can be a success. And I think there's so many doom and gloom out there, and independents are no good and they're not surviving. Well, it's probably because they're no good.
Yeah. And I think that I mean, harsh though that is, there is so much truth in there, and I think it's really hard to champion the hospitality industry at the same time as saying yes, but because I mean, and it's like, I always sort of, in my head, I don't say it out loud very often, but in my head, I always think, well, when Woolworths went and disappeared from the high street, everyone just went, well, yeah, obvious, you can have a lot of love for it, but they didn't do what was required to survive and never mind thrive, and certainly, hard though it is, and that's not taking away that the environment is very difficult for hospitality at the minute, and I'm not taking any of that away, but actually there is a lot of businesses out there that aren't, that could be run better. There is that reality as well.
Sometimes, you do want to be like, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
You can't take your finger off the pulse ever, when you're running a business or running a pub, things are changing, and if you don't change with those changes, you're going to get stuck behind, and unfortunately you do have to make hard decisions, like putting 30p on a pint, because that's what we need to do to survive, and we're telling people why we're doing it. And if we didn't, we might not survive. And I guess it's that constant, it is constant. You've got to be proactive. You've got to, for us, social media is super powerful. We are constantly spending money on photo shoots to make sure we can talk about the new menu and we can come across in a professional way. We are constantly looking at what the competition are doing, going to the competition, and they're chains, but we have to compete with them. Like, what are they doing? What can we do differently? You can't just rest on your laurels and be like, oh, we've had a good week, because a good week last week might not mean you have a good week in 3 weeks' time. Listening to the guests, what are they saying? It's always on.
Absolutely, and that is what the hospitality industry is all about. Hospitality is, I know, and I say this a lot, but hospitality has always been in crisis, and yet it is always adapting, always evolving, always changing, and it's right on that coalface of of what's going on in the world. But it does have to keep changing. It's, I mean, I had a venue when the smoking ban came in, and it was, everyone was saying, well, this will be the end of hospitality. I mean, bars, restaurants, they can't survive, pubs, they can't survive without people smoking, because those people won't come out anymore. Well, they did, but we had to change. We changed how we operated and what we were doing, and our customers changed with us. But I think it's really important, as you say, it's important to know who your customers are as well. So you need to be really, you just need to be very much in tune with what you're doing and why you're doing it, rather than sort of this general trying to appeal to everybody and expecting everybody to just appreciate that you're there.
Yeah, and that was massive for us. We know our position in the market. We know who our guests are. And that's why we love the industry. We love, like, no 2 days are the same. We can, people are always going to go out for food and drink. They don't go
Yeah,
out
yeah,
because they're like, oh, I'm
no,
hungry.
yeah,
They go out,
yeah.
want the experience. And to your point there about the smoking ban, the big thing at the moment is people aren't drinking as much. We're a destination. And people want to come to us. So we've had to expand our non-alcoholic range. So, and it's about offering the guest a choice. They can come in now and have a non-alcoholic Prosecco or a non-alcoholic wine or a Guinness Zero, which is flying. Because that's what's going to make them spend a little bit more with us than just having a soda and lime, but also gives them that choice. We aren't, when they come in, do Guinness Zero. If we said no, they'd be like, oh, okay. And it's being able to adapt to the changing needs of the guests.
And that's what's really important there, is that absolute understanding that you have, that people are not coming out for food and drink. People aren't leaving the house because of food and drink, which means that actually our opportunities to compete, we're not competing with, and if you think that you are, and then you're just competing on price, and that means you're competing with the likes of Tesco's and Netflix. Whereas in actual fact, if you have that understanding that people are coming out because actually they need your space to be the place where they come to have the conversations they want to have, and to be relaxed and not have to be at home or not have to be at work, then that's where the opportunity is for hospitality. I mean, it's where it always has been. It's just, if you can understand that better, then you can, then you understand your customers better. And I mean, to your point with not drinking, I don't drink. I haven't been a drinker for quite a long time, but I still love the pub, and and I still want to be able to go to the pub, and I go to too many places where and I want to spend money with them as well, and I go to too many places where the only option's soda water, and it's just disappointing for me, because I want to be able to give these venues my money, but they don't even have good coffee, for instance. I mean, I literally had this story from just the other day. Locally to me, I have a favourite pub. It's owned by a brewery, and I absolutely love it. It's a proper pub. My husband and I nipped in there, and I said, see if they've got anything non-alcoholic. If they're a brewery, if they've got anything low alcohol, non-alcoholic, I might just have a half of something with no alcohol in, instead of my usual soda water or sparkling water. And he came back, and he said the barman laughed at him and said, "No, mate, we're a pub." And I thought, so I won't be going back to my favourite pub ever again, which is sat there being my favourite pub for years. Oh, so now I've just been told categorically that I am not welcome, and that is despite me wanting to give you my money. Soda water, is it? All right, cheers, mate. I was just like gobsmacked, and it ruined my evening, because I spent the whole evening ranting about, I can't believe it, but because
Yeah,
I am their target customer. I am their target customer. Anyway, yeah.
And you have to evolve. You have to, now it's not a case of, when someone says to us, have you got a non-alcoholic beer? Yes, we've got a range. We've got actually more than one. And I think, we were very reluctant to, we couldn't find a good non-alcoholic wine, but now we have. And actually, at Sundays, it's, we're seeing people who are driving to us for great Sunday roast. They don't want to, not everybody drinks,
No.
like, to your
No.
point, that many reasons why people don't, but they don't want to have a sparkling water. They want to feel like that, they're having a drink, or just trying a new product that they haven't tried. So yeah, I think we've got to keep evolving. We've got to keep, and who knows what's next, but yeah, we can't stand still.
And the thing is, certainly with my thing is your customers do want to spend money with you as well. They want to support your business. They do want to spend money. So yeah, but tell me more about the pub. So I know it's a beautiful pub because I've seen photos. But for those, and as you say, you spend money on the things that are important, which is making it how it's look. But tell me about it. What is it all about other than just bringing a pub back to life? Who are your customers?
Yeah, so for us, it was a place where, we're predominantly food led, so we are high quality. Again, to stand out and find our position in the market, we are free range meat. We support British farmers, so we have all British cheeses on our cheese board. We are very seasonal, so we work with what is best at that time, and that might not necessarily mean British, because sometimes the best tomatoes at the right time of year are from Spain. But it's about finding good quality and making great plates of food that aren't fussy. So you're not going to come in and be like, oh my god, what's that? I don't understand that description on the menu. We do have a burger, we do have a lamb pie, we do have fish and chips. It's a fairly short menu because it changes every few months, and everything is pretty much made in house. We use a local baker in Bromsgrove for our bread, so we use Henley ice cream, which is not too far from us. So it's really champion like suppliers that we know are really good, fairly local, and then making plates of food that people want to eat, that suits, a Monday night fish and chips. We've got a lovely hake dish on at the moment. So if you want to go out on a Saturday night and have something a bit more feels like a treat, spend a bit more money, you can do. We've got a beautiful garden, and we've got a stretch tent on the terrace. So we've got shaded dining and glorious sunshine tables when it comes out.
Yeah.
And we've got a really great wine list, which has got quite a stretch. So we've got Chianti on at £79. We've got entry level wine at kind of 27. So again, and what we've done over the last 12 months is really kind of look at sales. So what is selling? What are people coming to us for? And when we've seen actually people are stretching up the list and drinking Sancerre, but an equally as good, premium red on. So we've really lent into that. And then, actually what we can't get round by us is really great fish. And Pete, our head chef, loves cooking with fish. So now we do fish on a Friday. So all our specials boards is just, leaning into that. And we're being quite well known for that. So yeah, it's a place for any occasion. We do have the locals coming in and sitting at the bar on a Friday night and having a couple of pints. We do have, the regulars coming in every Sunday for their Sunday lunch. But it's really people who like great food, are happy. Well, we say happy spending a little bit more. I mean, the M&B down the road is 50p more than us on some dishes, but it's about great quality plates of food in a welcoming environment. We say it's restaurant quality food, but we are still a pub.
But how are you finding it now, running your own business as opposed to being a cog or part of something else?
Well, there's no one to go to when things go wrong, like the tills aren't working. Or there's a HR issue where you're like, oh, me and Sarah look at each other and we're like, oh, that's us now. We need to sit and have that performance.
Yeah.
So it's, it is the buck stops with us. But we're fortunate in the respect that we've got a really strong team. All our chefs have been with us since the start. We've now got a deputy manager, an assistant manager, and a supervisor. So we have got a really good team that we can trust to deliver when we aren't there, which is great, which enables us to then, focus on the business and being proactive. So again, having those days away from the business where I can be like, right, okay, I need to start thinking about the summer. I need to make sure, people know we've got beer garden. So when people want to go and sit in the sun with the place they think of, so being proactive in that respect, and also for growth. So as I say, now being able to, put our first pub, to one side and let it just tick along to enable us now to look at second and hopefully third next year.
Brilliant. So second pub, you say you're opening July, is that right?
Yeah, hopefully. So we're just going through legals at the moment. It's another tenancy. So when we went off on our own, we, actually buying a freehold was not an option. That comes
No.
with huge
No,
risk.
no.
So we looked at a couple of leaseholds. We looked at some tenancy, and it just so happened that actually tenancy for us was the lowest risk. We weren't in, and there was generally not really a business there. Whereas often with leases, you're buying the goodwill of a business, and it's already fairly successful in its own right. So, and the second is another tenancy. But again, got great potential in an area where, again, there isn't a great food offering, but this will probably lend more to being a drinking venue. It's got a population, it's in more of a town with a population of 10,000 that could walk to it, as opposed to our little hamlet of 400. So it's wider demographic, but still doing what we do, which is offering great food. And I think it's, for us, again, back to my point about hospitality as a career and us not really having leaders that we enjoyed being around when we were actually operators. We want to change the perception of kind of what hospitality can be. And for us, it's about everybody being equal. It's about being a great environment. It's about learning and developing. We've already promoted 2 of our kitchen team. So, how can we show people that, hospitality is great and, have a, be, you don't want to get up and be thinking, oh, I've got to go to work today. We want it to be fun. We want everyone to enjoy working with us. So just, that in itself is why, another reason why we wanted to run our own business, because we want to be a great operator and want to be, a great employer.
And absolutely, and isn't that great? I mean, I'm telling you, it's great because I had that experience, all my years. Somebody recently asked me, though it was a poll actually, and somebody was looking for, I think they're writing an article about great mentors in the hospitality industry, and they were looking for, who in your career, who have you had as great mentors, point them in our direction type of thing. And I was like, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never had a great mentor, because I just, and I mean, for me, I started as an independent operator at just the age of 23. So to be fair on everybody, on these rubbish mentors that I never had, there wasn't very many opportunities for people, for me to find those mentors. But I think, isn't it great? Or as I say, I'm telling you, it's great that when you've not had mentors to actually decide, well, I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be the leader that I wish I'd had. And I think that's, I mean, and I think that's just absolutely amazing. And will serve you extremely well, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think there are, back to that mentor piece, I still speak to a lot of my, old team, and still kind of mentor them through challenges in work. And I think, how you can be, being a great leader is about listening and advising. And that is not necessarily about challenges in work, it's those personal challenges as well, especially when, back to our point about, dealing with 17, 18-year-olds who are going through personal challenges. We want them to come to us and, trust us to help them. And we've the team are great, and we want to just keep developing that and being a great place to be and give that work-life balance. The chefs, we pay overtime. Any chefs working or front of house, working over their 48 hours, we're paying overtime. We get them their 2 days off together. We understand that if you are hating your job, you aren't going to be the best version of yourself. So, making sure they are, enjoying it, is really important.
Absolutely. And having a team that all feels that you're in it together, no matter what position they're in. And this feeds back so beautifully to that 13-year-old you who's working as a KP, and how important just every single role in hospitality is. Just, and that, that those busy service, if everybody needs to be at the top of their game, but everyone needs to absolutely feel that they're part of the team in order to do that. And having great leaders is essential to that. So no, fantastic. And I honestly can't wait to see where you and Sarah take this, because it's so exciting. What you're doing just in that one pub is exciting already. And your passion and enthusiasm for it is absolutely inspiring. So thank you for joining me on this. Thank you for telling me your journey and story, and to get you where you are now. And I'm very grateful that you did decide to take that leap and decide to go into doing this for yourself, because I'm sure it's going to be hugely successful. And a great addition.
Fortune favours the brave. So yeah,
absolutely. So thank you so much for your time, and Bex, and I look forward to keeping in touch and catching up with you again in the future when you've got, I don't know, where's this end? How many pubs are you looking for?
Well, the plan was 5, but Sarah now keeps telling me 3 will be enough. So watch this space.
Yeah, well, 3 probably will be enough, but yes, we'll watch the space. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. And I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Cassie.